Hello and welcome to the Embodying Philosophy podcast. My name is Floss and I'm your host, a scholar practitioner, yoga teacher and geek for all things embodied philosophy. In modern times, we all too often think of philosophy as abstract ideas irrelevant to how we live our lives. But in ancient and pre-modern times, philosophy was a way of life. This podcast seeks to explore and revive this understanding of philosophy as a way of life, embodying philosophy as the practice of meaningful inquiry in relation to our lives as they are lived today in a pluralistic and diverse world, through engagement with ideas, practices, and traditions across time and space, from yoga to Christianity and beyond. Welcome to episode 4 of the Embodying Philosophy podcast. This episode is the second part of an interview with Dr Ankur Barua where we discuss the question, what is yoga? If you haven't listened to part 1 of the interview in episode 3, you might want to do that now, but otherwise just listen in and enjoy. We'll begin this episode with a little recap of the end of part 1 of the interview, exploring the tension between categories and philosophy and theory in relation to yoga, and yoga as a way of being that transcends those categories. We'll then explore in more detail the mind-body connection in yoga practice as a way of transforming our being. Enjoy the episode.
People who have really developed a type of yogic stability, they would have done it without any of these labels. I mean, which is not to say that these labels are not useful. They are extremely useful in laying down a pathway, giving you pointers, giving you a graduated mechanism. But if the only thing that I think of when I wake up in the morning, okay, right now, is it Raja I'm doing or Karma? Or when I go to sleep, okay, did I do more of Bhakti or did I do more of Jnana? That is again to reify these categories, make these concepts into big boxes, into big categories.
Yet tradition and ideas are important, because earlier you talked about this kind of relationality between practice and ideas or cosmology as this complete package, and both being rooted in technologies of self. I love this phrase.
So just as we have a technology for making a car, making an engine, which helps us to go from point A to B, likewise we have a technology which will help us to retrieve the self, retrieve the deep self from its immersion in worldliness. So because of all kinds of anxieties and concerns, I do not have time to reflect on who am I, why am I here. So a technology of the self will help me to dig deeper into my everyday worldliness and try to answer these very difficult questions. So that's the technology of the self.
Yeah, and it's also a kind of, I know Gavin Flood's in the Tantric Body, he talks a lot about the role of tradition and text in the development of the subject, the yogic subject, in the context of tradition. So we do need, I think at any point in time, the practice, the ideas.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. I mean, a while ago, I may have used this phrase. If I did not, I'm using it now. The phrase that I may have used is a certain lightness with respect to categories. I did not say categories do not exist, but we have to handle them with a certain lightness. Not always asking the question, what category is it now? What category is it tomorrow? What category was it yesterday? Because that kind of categorical thinking is part of the deconstruction or the dismantling of this kind of thinking with categories. It's part of the journey of yoga. It's not the only thing that yoga is doing. But if I get mentally fixated on this category, this classification, what yoga is supposed to promote on many understandings of yoga is a certain lightness, a way of being in the world.
And I do think the physical or the embodied practice of yoga plays a central role in that deconstructing. I mean, in my own practice, it's often through connecting to the body that my own categories or ideas about myself, reality, my current circumstances shift, and new revelations come about.
Yes, indeed. I mean, what we have to keep in mind is that on many yogic understanding, we human beings are not just mind or body. We are deeply psychosomatic, right? So our bodily being, our psychic being, our spiritual being, they are all deeply interrelated and intertwined. So physical forms of yoga are not totally pointless. They're very fundamental to rewiring our mentality, to restructuring our subjectivity. So, for example, I can tell you now, okay, the point of yoga is to mentally become calm. And as some wise person has said, when somebody is not feeling calm, asking people to become calm makes them only more agitated. So I can give you a full lecture on yoga, 50 minutes. Will it help you to become calm? Maybe not. What you need to do sometimes is just do a kind of stretching, a kind of breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. And a form of breathing in, breathing out may help you to become calm much more readily than one full lecture on the different complexities or meanings of yoga, right? So why is that so? Because our psychic being, our bodily being, our spiritual being, our mental being, all these different dimensions of our human existence are all deeply interrelated. And sometimes taking a nice walk in the beautiful countryside will do wonders for you if you want to feel calm. Don't go to the library to read books on yoga, right? But that doesn't mean those books on yoga are totally pointless, because this will help you to understand what is the point of taking a walk on a beautiful countryside road. What is it that you are supposed to cultivate? Why is it that you are supposed to cultivate that? What may be the goal? What may be the point, the significance of cultivating that? That is what we may call, quote-unquote, the theory of yoga, very loosely speaking.
And different people, I think, might find different things help them. I mean, the Buddha had an idea of, what was it, something means?
I mean, he used a phrase, I mean, maybe not the Buddha himself, but in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, there is the idea of skillful means.
Skillful means.
So the point is that a particular guru may skillfully prescribe different kinds of means. So the guru may say, okay, you are the intellectual type. You like to overthink everything. Go and take a walk. Or the guru may say, oh, what? You have never read a book on yoga? No, don't do all this practice right now. Go and read the book. So depending on who the disciple is, depending on the disciple's dispositions and likings and dislikings, likes and dislikes, the guru may compassionately, it's all about compassion, it's all about kindness, it's all about karuna. The guru may compassionately calibrate the teaching differently to different audiences. And although the concept is from Buddhism, many Hindu gurus, many yoga gurus also practice this form of means which are tailored, customized to the needs and requirements of the disciple.
Yes. And one thing I'm also interested in relation to that is not just about, on an individual level, the different dispositions of different practitioners, but actually different life stages. Because you talk about calmness, and I think calmness is important, but one thing I question in my own practice and teaching as a yoga teacher and practitioner is, okay, what's actually going to be functional in terms of the body-mind connection, and where do we want to go? Because some yoga classes I find can make you more agitated. They can actually stir up the nervous system, so I leave feeling less calm, or sometimes you feel too calm and too tired and kind of even sluggish.
And you may fall asleep.
But how? And then we need to go and function in the world, because obviously, going back to this first point, our soteriology, i.e. our goals of yoga, may be different to that of Patanjali's time or the medieval period. So maybe you could say something about how yoga's changed in relation to the people who practice it, their goals, and how yoga perhaps in the past was seen about liberation from the world, as well as, from the social world, as well as the material world. But today, we are social beings, but not many of us are renunciates.
Yeah. But again, to pick up a point that you yourself noted a while ago, the there was a great diversity of meanings of yoga in pre-modern South Asia, pre-modern Hinduism. It does not mean that everybody who was doing yoga was renouncing the social world and retreating to the Himalayas. Say, if you are practicing what is called bhakti yoga, the whole point of bhakti yoga is to make you more efficient and skillful in navigating and negotiating the complexities of the everyday world, right? So there are forms of yoga which are indeed connected with world negation in the sense of becoming a monk or becoming an ascetic. So that is one style of yoga. Now, instead of talking about these differences, on this occasion, right now, let me instead talk about certain continuities, certain long-range similarities I see between pre-modern South Asian yoga and contemporary Western styles of yoga. And let's say our condition of worldliness, our condition of finitude is marked by fragmentation. We are broken beings. And what is this fragmentation I'm talking about? The point that our bodily being, our psychic being, our mental being, our spiritual being are flying apart in different directions. There is this lack of inner integration. There is a lack of inner unity, that fragmentation. And what yoga may help us to do is to yoke together, to bring together, to harness these different bits and pieces of our psychosomatic existence, which tend to fly apart in different directions. Through this development of purification, of stability, of steadfastness, of equilibrium, and that quest for a transcendence of fragmentation can take different forms, that I agree. If you are in the 14th century in South India, you may become an ascetic and retreat to an ashram in the Himalayas. If you are in the 19th century in northern India, you may say, well, my way of doing yoga is by practicing in socio-political activities. For example, to give the most famous example, Gandhi believed that his life as a yogin, as a karma yogin, and his life as a political, social, moral leader were deeply intertwined. So yoga does not necessarily mean that you have to renounce the world, social circuits and social relations. Yoga can give you the strength to deal with the storm and stress of everyday life even better, because it can help you to heal all the deep fragmentation that we generally live with.
Why are humans so fragmented? Because I think we often think I have a tendency to think it's especially the case today. Do you think it's a universal facet of our experience?
Yeah.
So why?
Yeah. So that is a very interesting question, and it may look like an empirical question, but it's not an empirical question, is it? What I mean by an empirical question is, how many laptops are there in this room? The answer to that question is 2. But a question like, why do human beings often feel a deep dis-ease, a sense of not satisfied with the world? That kind of a question does not have this kind of ready-made answer. Well, is it because we have 2 eyes? Is that an answer? No. Because we like to drink water when we are thirsty? Is that true? So these kinds of questions are what are called quote-unquote metaphysical questions. And the answers to such metaphysical questions, for better or worse, are also metaphysical. Mm-hmm. So the standard Hindu answer is that we are born into this world in a state of ignorance, in a state of avidya. And that avidya is a marker of our human finitude, which is characterized by impermanence, transience, lack of complete knowledge about ourselves, lack of deep insight about who we are. And that is the best I can do, to reflect the yoga traditions as to why is it that we human beings are in a state of fragmentation. Of course, if we were not, then we would not need yoga in the first place. We would already be born with that state of deep yoking across the different dimensions of our psychosomatic being, bodily being, mental being, psychic being, spiritual being. That golden thread of unity would already be in place.
And I guess that goes back to your earlier point that this baseline yoga, this kind of meditative calmness that some people seem to be rooted in, exceptionally, is found across traditions.
Yes.
And many, if not all, religious, spiritual traditions, philosophical traditions, do have an understanding of this fragmentation. I mean, in Christianity it would be sin. I don't know about Islam.
Well, I mean, Islam, one such variation on this answer could be that we have strayed away from our true maker and we have lost sense of our true nature. So we are not obeying the decrees or the commandments of God. So there will be different versions of this claim that human finitude is marked by a sense of dissatisfactoriness. That human finitude is marked by different kinds of imperfection. This does not mean that we have to negate our finitude. Rather, we have to use our finitude as a vehicle, as an instrument for going beyond it. Right? So say our minds, our thinking minds, it causes us so much distress. It keeps us awake at night, sometimes thinking about all kinds of possibilities. Does it mean that the mind is a terrible thing? No. We can learn to use the mind creatively, positively, by negating different kinds of negativity, and use the mind as a positive vehicle for creative, constructive thinking. Right? So, on the one hand, we are finite beings, but that in itself is not a sign of something terribly wrong gone with us. If you can learn how to skillfully use this, what I may call creative negativity, right? We can use the negative dimensions of our finitude creatively, constructively. We can reconstruct the human psyche. And yoga is one of many such spiritual disciplines which help us to restrain the fluctuating senses. We are constantly in a state of distraction, right? So now that we talk about distraction because of social media, all these yoga commentaries were talking about this distraction 2,000 years ago, right? This point that the senses are always running away after the different objects out there. Now I see a tree, then I see a car, then I see this. People were talking about this in yoga commentaries 1,500 years ago. I mean, what social media may have done to us, it may have highlighted that problem even more acutely, because now you can keep on checking Google every 15 minutes. But it's not that 1,500 years ago people did not have these kinds of distractions. So repeatedly we hear the claim that the mind gets scattered, the mind gets dispersed, the mind gets distracted, like waves on a turbulent river. And we have to steady the waves, calm the waves, so that we become like the serene surface of a placid lake, in which you can see our true reflection without any disturbance or distraction. That's partly why I've been using this phrase meditative stability, just to reflect that concept. That we are constantly being pulled away from our center. So yoga is this constant challenge to return to the center. And as they say, or as I say, the longest road is the way back home. So trying to pull oneself back, or one aspect of oneself back to that center, is very painful in the beginning. But it can become natural, because the claim is that is our natural state, to be at rest, to be at peace with the world.
And then I guess we get to the deepest metaphysical questions, like, is coming back to that self a self? Is that self a self, which Hinduism or yoga would most likely say yes, it's the Atman?
Yes.
Or is it a no self?
Yes.
As would be the Buddhist perspective.
Yeah. I mean, when you suddenly dropped in the Buddha, I mean, I meant to point that out, that Buddhist forms of yoga, they do not operate with the language of a substantial, enduring self, Atman. However we understand the Atman, there's again different debates. But Buddhism uses the language of not self, causal continuity, dependent origination. It's a different language game altogether. But yeah, I mean, Buddhist forms of yoga are very similar in certain experiential dimensions with Hindu forms of yoga. They also talk about altruism, self-control, meditative stability, contemplative inquiry, and so on. Just that the quote-unquote metaphysics is quite different. So here again, I have a particular statement from an Upanishad called the Katha Upanishad. And it says, this they consider to be yoga. The word yoga turns up there in the Katha Upanishad. So again, problems of dating, but let's say 600 BCE.
So much older than
the Yoga Sutra. Right? So this they consider to be yoga, the steady control of the senses, Indriya Dharanam, that word dharana. And then one becomes undistracted. One loses one's dispersal, one loses one's scattering in the world. So this is straight out of the Katha Upanishad, which is why I've been using that kind of terminology. So you can see, if I say that language is distinctively Hindu, distinctively Indian, yes, from a historical, geographical point of view, this is not coming out of Australia or somewhere in Great Britain. It's coming out of India in 800, 600, 500 BCE. But this idea that these senses which are fluctuating, running away after different things, can be restrained, stabilized, and reoriented towards some other goal. You don't have to be Hindu to do this. You don't have to do yoga to do this. Different people, Hindu or not, have found different ways of doing this thing called restraining the senses, the sense organs.
And I think one question that this fascinating conversation has left me with, this is not the first time I thought this question, but this idea of meditative stability, calmness, what does that mean for then how we live our lives? Is there an innate sense of right choice, virtue, ethics, morality, if you're this connected? Or, how do we live in a world outwardly? What are our values in terms of aspirations, in a capitalist world, in a globalized world, in terms of relationships and our path, our calling, when we are... And does that change based on the tradition?
Yeah. So let me begin by giving you what, in one sense, is the simple answer. The simple answer is this, that if you are a Hindu guru, part of your job description is precisely to answer such questions. And what the Hindu guru will do is that based on a particular reading of the Upanishads, Yoga Sutra, various other texts, the Hindu guru is supposed to answer questions like, should I rather get married now or should I go to university? Or should I use this money which I have been saving for my daughter's wedding or go on a pilgrimage? Or should I be buying a car now? Or more generally, how should I live my life? What is the pathway to a good life? What is the pathway to human flourishing and all of that? So you can see why I'm saying it is a relatively simple answer, because then I don't have to answer that question for you. But to try to answer the question from a different perspective, the Yoga Sutras and the yoga traditions in general lay down certain practices, certain forms of abstinences, certain observances. They're called yama and niyama. For example, yama includes non-harming others, truthfulness, not stealing. Niyama includes purity, contentment, satisfaction, forms of austerity. And the Yoga Sutra in one place, I think 133, talks about the cultivation of 4 types of virtue, such as friendliness, compassion, gladness, and equanimity towards objects. And what is the point of cultivating these virtues or dispositions? The idea is that the human mind, which is, let's say, in one sense of naturally fragmented, dispersed, running after things, it can become stabilized. So, for example, when I'm cultivating friendliness towards you, I can think of your Atman, my Atman as related in some kind of harmony, as opposed to me harboring hatred and animosity towards you. Then I'll be like, okay, how can I do terrible things to Florence? What may be okay? Should I do that? Should I do that? Instead of doing that, the cultivation of compassion, of gladness, of equanimity may be more conducive to this meditative stability. So what we may call quote-unquote metaphysics and quote-unquote ethics are deeply, again, interrelated. And that's a general point in many pre-modern styles of philosophy, that our metaphysical understanding of what reality is and our moral practice about how to become a virtuous being are deeply interconnected. Become what you are is the point. That if you are truly this deep self which is related with the cosmos, then you must try to express that deep relationality in the way you behave with other people. So if the central message of the universe is relationality, become integrated, go beyond fragmentation, then by harboring animosity, am I not doing just that? Am I not becoming even more fragmented?
So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah.
Not that there's ethical...
Which come first, or that come first. But think of this as a loop, which is virtuous, not vicious.
A virtuous loop.
Yes, it's a virtuous loop and not a vicious loop, because here is my metaphysics and here is my ethics, and they form 2 dimensions of an interrelated spiral. So the point is not that Monday to Friday I do my theory, then on the weekend I do my practice. But rather that my quote-unquote theory or my developing insight into the nature of reality will reinforce my practice. And my practice will help me to understand on Monday my theory even better. So that's what I mean by the spiraling feedback loop.
Well, I think that leads us really well to the final question that I'd love to ask you today for the Embodying Philosophy podcast. And that is, what does philosophy as a way of life mean for you?
Okay. So again, deep breath, because now that I'm hearing this question for the first time, I'm thinking in many different directions. But to give you a particular answer that reflects my job description, which is to teach people Hinduism and sometimes Buddhism, I would say my way of embodying philosophy is my pedagogic style of skillful means, where I have different students with different dispositions from different disciplinary perspectives, and I try to modulate my answer to their questions depending on my sense of what is it that they're looking for, what kind of an answer are they searching for, without of course diluting the content, because the answer is the answer, irrespective of whom I'm speaking to. But let's say somebody has a deep interest in Hindu-Christian comparative theology, then the answer I may give to that person would be quite different from somebody who only wants to read the text in Sanskrit and then come up with a good translation. So trying to embody philosophy would mean not just giving a theoretically good answer or an answer that reflects the text, but modulating it, calibrating it in accordance with the needs, in the broad sense of need of the student. So that's one thing I can think of, and a slightly different answer, which would reinforce a point I made earlier when I said many Hindus may find themselves in this continuum between baseline yoga and tradition-rooted yoga. Say, when I was very little, when I was a child, I was trained in singing forms of classical music, let's call them. And many of these forms of music have, broadly speaking, a bhakti orientation. But let's say I have not received initiation from a particular Hindu guru. And for me, music has become a form of yoga. When I'm learning a new song by listening to it on YouTube, to learn a song, you have to get the beat right, the meter right, you have to get all the words, the syllables right. So the form of the song and the matter or the content of the song have to be perfectly harmonized. There has to be a perfect yoga or a yoking between the sura or the melody and the words. You cannot have only the melody and the words are going apart in different directions. You will lose the beat. You cannot have only the words. That is just a poem. It's not a song. You have to have the words perfectly aligned, perfectly harmonized, perfectly synchronized with the beat, with the melody, and all of that. So when I was saying that, I mean, some people can unself-consciously be doing yoga in this baseline sense, I think I do it. Like every time I'm learning a new song, it can take me up to 45 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days to get the melody right. Then I have to get the beat right. And bringing it together is for me a form of yoga. And I sometimes sing for my students to bring them into these kinds of sonic spaces, just to highlight to them that one of the most difficult things about life as an academic is to pay attention to minute details. And that is what a yogic style of contemplative inquiry can help you to do. Because nowadays we sometimes we live in an atmosphere where we go for quantity and not quality. It's about how many things you can say and how quickly and what have you produced. We often forget that God lies in the details. It is in the footnote, in the semicolon, the full stop, the verb, that adjective, that adverb. And my musical training, what I'm calling musical yoga, has helped me to deeply appreciate the significance of the particular, the significance of what is seemingly trivial, right? Like that semicolon has to be there, because otherwise you will lose the beat, you will lose the meter, you will forget the word. So just as a beautiful song is this yoga of form and matter, likewise our academic thinking is a yoga of thinking, of writing and reading. So all of this, of course, I don't mean to say I consciously say this in so many words to my students, but I would answer your question that way, that for me, this is the this is the type of embodied philosophy, partly by drawing on aspects of yoga that I try to perform and express and act.
Wow, well, thank you so much, Ankur, for that wonderful talk, and your answer to those final questions as well was really something. You are the guru to us all in this faculty. So I'm sure we'll hear from you again in the future.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me again.
A huge thank you to Dr. Ankur Barua for joining me for this 2-part interview on what is yoga. I hope you've enjoyed Ankur's expertise in this field, and do check out his YouTube channel in the show notes below. In the meantime, have a wonderful week, and I'll see you soon for episode 5 of the Embodying Philosophy podcast. Goodbye.